Okay, so this next video lecture is still the continuation of our Module 5 for the expenditure cycle. So we are now in the physical system. So physical accounting information system, this is a combination of our computer technology and human activity. So this is a mix of possible technology or human options which creates a continuum. So at one end are minimal technology system that rely heavily on our human involvement and manual procedures. So at the other end of the continuum are the advanced technology systems which replaces the human activity with automated processes. Okay, so basically this is how an entity will illustrate, okay, how their expenditure cycle will take place. Okay, or is it based on a manual procedure or an automated procedure? So for the cash disbursement system, periodically, accounts payable searches the open vouchers payable file for the items with payments due. So this is to avoid any interest if payment will be made after the due date. So the accounts payable will send the voucher and supporting documents to the cash disbursements department. So the accounts payable will update the accounts payable subsidiary ledger. So our cash disbursement department will prepare the check. They will record the information in the check register, or others also use the cash disbursement journal. So aside from that, returns paid vouchers will be sent to the accounts payable and mails the check to the supplier. Okay, so and then there will be a journal voucher that will be sent to the general ledger department who prepares the updating of our accounts payable. So the entry for the cash disbursement, of course, is we will debit your accounts payable and credit to cash. So this is to confirm, okay, if this accounts are already paid, so it will be deducted from our account balances. Okay, so the general ledger department will receive the following: the journal voucher from the cash disbursements, a summary of the accounts payable subsidiary from the accounts payable department, and the journal voucher. This will be used to update the general ledger. So these are the source document and audit trail that will be used later on. So the accounts payable control account is reconciled with our subsidiary summary to make sure that they are updated accordingly. Okay, so in a data flow diagram, so this is how it will look like. Okay, so you just illustrate it using the data flow diagram. Okay, so we also have here, okay, the cash disbursement system. Okay. So to continue, what about computer-based accounting system? Okay, so in the computer-based accounting system, okay, so technology can be viewed as a continuum with two extremes. So as mentioned earlier, there is automation, meaning the use of technology to improve efficiency and effectiveness, and re-engineering. So this is used to restructure the business processes and the firm organization if necessary. So we have here the levels of automating and re-engineering the ordering. Okay, of course, first, computer generates. In this case, the computer will generate the purchases manually. Okay, they will generate it, meaning, computer will generate the purchase order. But in a manual system, this is generated manually by a personnel. But in this case, if this is automated, then the computer system will make it for us. Okay, so computer-generated purchase orders, meaning there is no requisition needed, and purchase order will not be sent until they are manually received. So that's how it is in automation processes. Third, the computer will generate the purchase order. So this is automatically sent without manual review. And fourth, electronic data interchange or EDI, meaning computer-to-computer communication without purchase order will take place. So this is how fast the transactions will be if automating, okay, will be used in the ordering process. But of course, take note that audit trail is lacking, okay, in this type of processes. For the expenditure cycle database, we have the master file. So it will include the supplier or the vendor's information or file, our accounts payable, and merchandise inventory files. Another is the transaction and open document files. So this will include purchase order files, open purchase order file, suppliers invoices, open vouchers, and cash disbursements file. And the database can also have other files to be stored, like supplier reference, history, or buyer files, and accounts payable details. Okay. For computer-based purchases, so here, a data processing department will perform the routine accounting tasks. So in purchasing a computer program, this will identify the inventory requirements. So we have here the following methods used for authorizing and ordering inventories in a computer-based purchases. First, the system will prepare the purchase order, and then it will be sent to the purchases department for review, and then it will be for approval. So it will be signified through their signatures, and it will be distributed to the different departments or personnel who will be responsible for these transactions. Second, the system distributes now the purchase orders directly to the vendors and the internal users by passing the purchases. Okay, so in a computer-based processes, there are still some manual procedures that needs to be taken place. Unlike with the automation, there is no human intervention. Okay, so the system will use electronic data interchange or EDI and electronically places the order without the POs. But of course, we know that this purchase order were approved, okay, and reviewed before it was processed. So other tasks performed automatically by the computer includes the following: updates in the inventory of our subsidiary file from the receiving report. The computer can also calculate batch totals for our general ledger for updating. They will close the corresponding records in the open purchase order file to the closed purchase order file. Okay, and the computer can also validate the voucher records against valid vendor files. Okay. Computer-based cash disbursement. So this is the settlement already of our credit to the vendors or suppliers. So the tasks performed automatically by the computer for the cash disbursement procedures are the following. First, the system will scan the vouchers currently due. They will print checks for these vouchers, record these checks in the check register. Batch totals also can be prepared for general ledger and update procedures. Okay, so those are the tasks that the computer can do for the purchase or the cash disbursement. So this is how batch purchases system takes place in an illustration. Okay. So re-engineering. Actually, we have mentioned this in the discussion earlier. It was just illustrated this week. Okay, so we will proceed with the advantages of real-time data input and processing over our advantages, of real-time data input and our processing over batch processing. So here, it will shorten the time, of course, login record keeping. So this is normally the time, okay, the log time in recording, which makes the process longer. Okay, but if this is done real time, okay, so it will shorten, okay, this record keeping. Hence, records are more current. Another is it will eliminate much of the routine manual procedures such as transcribing information onto paper documents, so paperless transactions. Another is it will eliminate much of the storage and shuffling of paper documents, and it will reduce data entry correction because it will be done electronically. Okay. So we have here the summary of internal controls for our expenditure cycle, specifically for purchases and cash disbursement processes. Okay, for transaction authorization, of course, in purchasing there should be inventory control. For cash disbursement, accounts payable will be authorized for payment before it can be processed. For segregation of duties, in purchasing, inventory control will be separated from the purchasing and inventory custody. Okay, so accounts payable subsidiary ledger will also be separated from the general ledger, if that is possible. For the cash disbursement, separate accounts payable subsidiary ledger and cash disbursements and general ledger functions should be maintained. For supervision, for purchases, there should be a receiving department that will be responsible for inspection, okay, of the received items. For accounting records, for purchases, accounts payable subsidiary ledger, general ledger, purchases requisition, purchase order file, and receiving report file should be maintained. For the cash disbursement, voucher payable file, accounts payable subsidiary ledger, cash disbursements journal, general ledger, cash accounts should be maintained. For the access, in terms of purchases, so there should be a security of physical assets. So there should also be limited access to the accounting records, okay, of the above accounting records. For the cash disbursements, there should also be proper security over cash. It should be it should have a limited access, okay, to the accounting records also mentioned. For independent verification, under the purchases, accounts payable will be reconciled to our source documents before this liability or accounts payable will be recorded. General ledger will also be reconciled with the overall accuracy of the process. For cash disbursement, final review, or there should be a final review by the cash disbursements officer, and overall reconciliation by the general ledger should be maintained. And there should also be a periodic bank reconciliation by the controller, okay, to make sure that all disbursements are appropriate and authorized for. Okay, for the general internal controls, so of course this is the same with what we have mentioned. Okay, so in this case, it will include the organizational controls, meaning there should be segregation of duties, documentation, asset accountability controls, management practices, data center, operation, authorization, and access controls, respectively. So we have here, for the authorization controls, of course, purchases of inventory should be authorized by the inventory control department and not by any purchasing agents. Okay, so please take note of that. The accounts payable will authorize the payments of bills and not the cash disbursement clerk who writes the checks. Okay. For computer-based authorization controls, okay, in the case of automation, authorizations are automated, meaning program decision rules must be debugged. So automating inventory and EDI and just-in-time and faulty inventory model can lead to over purchasing or under purchasing. So therefore, cash disbursements may also be automated to prepare the check printing and signing. So the programming logic must be flawless, okay, and automated signing only below peso or dollar or value threshold. But again, it is more secure if there are manual procedures that will be taken place along with automation, okay, to make sure that controls will be effective. Traditional segregation of duties, warehouse, inventory control, accounts payable, general ledger, requisition, purchases, purchase returns and allowances, and cash disbursement should be performed by different individuals or departments. Okay, so segregation of functions, meaning custody of the asset or inventory by the warehouse must be separated from those who are recording the transactions. Custody of the asset, cash, by the cash disbursement must also be separate from those who are recording it, okay, in the books of accounts to avoid manipulation. Computer-based segregation of function. So here, there should be an extensive consolidation by the computer of tasks traditionally segregated, okay, computer programs which are authorized and process the purchase orders. The computer programs authorize and issue checks to vendors, but again, to make sure that there is security, limited access, and segregation of duties, as well as coupling it with manual procedures, okay, are relevant for effective internal control. For supervision, within the expenditure cycle, supervision is of highest importance in receiving especially of the items, where the inventory arrives and is logged in by a receiving clerk. So there is a need to minimize failures to properly inspect the assets and theft of those assets. So this is the purpose of having our receiving department and the blind receiving report. For computer-based supervision, automation often leads to collapsing of traditional segregation of duties. So this will require greater supervision. So it takes on a new aspects as technology advances and electronic monitoring becomes more difficult as the workplace becomes more sophisticated and employees may have advanced IT training. So there's a possibility that they can override, okay, or manipulate those items. Okay. Accounting records. So the organization must maintain adequate records as mentioned. Okay, for accounts payable, vouchers payable, checks, general ledger, and subsidiary ledgers. For the for the computer-based accounting system, so the accounting records will be reliable and secured of stored digitalized data. Okay, and accountants should be skeptical about accuracy of the hard copy or printouts. So the system needs to ensure that the backups of all these files are continuously kept. Okay, for any time it can be accessed. Okay, most automated systems still have a lot of paper documents, however. So this is actually good in audit trail purposes, but it is often inefficient. As the system becomes increasingly paperless, maintaining an audit trail becomes more difficult because it will eliminate audit trail. Access controls. So access to inventories, cash, and accounting records should be controlled and managed. So that's why there is segregation of duties. For computer-based access control, magnetic records are vulnerable to both authorized and unauthorized exposure, and they should be protected. It must have limited file accessibility, and programs must be safeguarded and monitored always. Independent verification. So the accounts payable department will verify much of the work done within the expenditure cycle. So the purchase requisition, purchase orders, receiving reports, and suppliers' invoice must be checked and verified. Okay, the general ledger department verifies it. The total obligations recorded, they make sure that it is equal to the total inventories received, and the total reductions in accounts payable are also equal to the total disbursements of cash. So for computer-based identification, automating the accounting functions will reduce the need for verification, okay? Because it reduces the chances of fraud and error in the expenditure cycle. However, the need for verification shifts to the computer program and the programmers, where fraud and error may still be present. So that's the problem. That's why, again, it should have an physical control over the access, okay, of these files. So those are the physical systems for our revenue cycle, specifically for our purchases and cash disbursement procedures.